can't. The Buddha taught the teachings 2,000 years ago, but we didn't have the opportunity, or if we did have the opportunity back then, we don't remember it now. And so in this lifetime, we don't have an opportunity to get any teachings directly from the Buddha. But as Trungpa Rinpoche always says, does that mean that we don't have the opportunity to get the teachings? Actually, it doesn't mean that, because the Buddha taught his disciples, and then his disciples taught their disciples, and their disciples taught their disciples, all the way down in what we call a lineage of gurus, people who got the teachings, practiced them, mastered them, and people of all types. Rinpoche doesn't usually say this, but it's important to say this, especially in this day and age, that there were women, there were men, there are people of all types. Some of the people who gained realization were very young, some were very old. There are stories of people who were as young as 7 achieving arhatship. There are stories of people as old as 100 achieving arhatship. It doesn't matter your age or your gender or anything like that. What matters is that you devote yourself to the Dharma and practice the Dharma, and you have to get the instructions. And so they've been passed down in this lineage of gurus and that's now come to us through masters such as Khenpo Trungpa Rinpoche, who many of us have studied directly from. And if not Khenpo Trungpa Rinpoche, then all the other masters that we have the opportunity to contact. So these are what we call the gurus of the lineage, or the lineage gurus for short. And then you have the guru who really says things in ways that really connect with you and that really, ideally help you see the nature of your mind. And that's what we would call the root guru. So you have the root guru and your lineage gurus. And actually, some people even have multiple root gurus. Like in our lineage prayer, the 16th Karmapa has 2 root gurus, Palden Chinsa Reza and Pema Wancha Gyalpo, the 11th Sutta and the 2nd Jamram Konto, right? So it's not necessarily just one root guru. You can have 2. You can have 3. You can have 4, depending. Mikya Dorje had 4 gurus, root gurus considered root gurus. But really, when we mean the root guru, ideally, that's the person who introduces you to the nature of your mind, the nature of reality as it actually is. For most of us, though, we haven't got to that point. And so we take the root guru as the person who we feel like a real connection to. So we supplicate them to say, oh, please grant us the blessings of the lineage. When we say blessings, we're not talking about any magic thing that makes you feel, does anything to you. It means that you understand the teachings and they change the way you think. Or you get a certain feeling or a certain experience and it changes the way you think. That's what we mean by a blessing. We don't mean hocus pocus. Nothing magic here. It's just sort of affecting your mind, changing your mind. And that's what we mean by blessings. So we recite these prayers to them if we have great faith and devotion, then as you have faith and devotion, your own mind becomes more receptive. When your mind is more receptive, then you're able to receive the blessings. That means your mind is open to being changed. And so that is why we recite the lineage prayers at the beginning of each session. So we will recite the lineage prayers. Let me get it going here. What do we have? Let's see. Okay, share screen. Is this what we want? Looks like it. Okay, where did we go? So this morning we will recite the prayer in English. In the afternoon we'll recite it in Tibetan, because we recited in Tibetan last night. So we're going to recite it in English, and we'll do it with the melody. Om Re Vajra Vidya Narama Mila Reba Vajra no 3 times karma and lineage holders of the elder fold and younger grade. Vajra kontaklung sampa stropa and and so forth. Protectors of all beings, the unequal who have gained mastery of the profound of Mahamudra. Om Conjugal heed my prayer, hold. Please bless me so I may adopt your ways of liberation. Just as revulsions taught to be the legs of meditation, this meditator does not cling to any foot of and severs all the ties that bind me to this present life. Please bless me to be unattached to one or to gain. Just as devotion's taught to be the head of meditation, continually this meditator supplicates the Guru, who opens up the door to the truth with instructions. Please bless me so that uncontrived devotion may well forth, as non-distractions taught to be the core of meditation. This meditator just remains not altering at all. The fresh and pristine essence of whatever thought occurs. Please bless me to be free from thinking there's a meditation. Just as it's taught the essence of our thoughts is Dharmakaya, not anything at all, and yet arising in our way. Appearing for this meditator in unceasing play. Bless me to know samsara and nirvana tune. In all my future lifetimes may I never be apart from the authentic Gurus and embrace the Dharma's glory. May I perfect the qualities of all the paths and levels, and may I swiftly rise the state of Vajradhara. Next, we will recite the request to teach. So when we have Dharma teachings, we usually traditionally begin with a request to teach the Dharma. And you should think as you're reciting this request that you're not asking me only, or me in particular. You should think to yourself that you are asking all of the Buddhas and all of the world realms who have awakened to Buddhahood but not yet taught the Dharma to teach the Dharma. Because when the Buddha Shakyamuni awakened to Buddhahood, for 7 weeks, he didn't teach the Dharma until he was asked. So if there's a world realm where there's a Buddha who's awakened and hasn't yet taught the Dharma because no one's asking them to, then this is a real loss for that universe. So you should think to yourselves as you recite these next 3 verses, one of the 7-branch prayer of doing things to accumulate merit, then offering a mandala, offering the universe, and then the actual request to teach. You should think to yourself that you are doing this not just so that Dharma may be turned here by some weird Khenpo, but that it may be spread in all universes everywhere where there are Buddhas who have not taught the Dharma. So please, thinking in this way, let's recite the request to teach the Dharma. I dedicate to enlightenment whatever slight merit I have gathered from prostrating and offering, confessing and rejoicing, requesting and from making supplications. This earth perfumed with scented waters, strewn with flowers, graced with Mount Meru, the 4 lands, the sun and moon, I visualize to be a Buddha realm and offer so that all beings enjoy a perfectly pure realm. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the great foundation and common vehicles according to the specific aims and intellects of sentient beings. The Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas, the 3 times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now please think to yourself that as we begin our teaching this morning, that we are doing this teaching in order to bring all sentient beings, all of our mothers, wherever they may be, all of our mothers from past lives, to bring all of them to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they were all Buddhas? I mean, if you think about social change, like you have a lot of homeless people here in Portland, wouldn't it be wonderful if they were all Buddhas? Wouldn't it be wonderful if all the people on the other end of the social system were all Buddhas? If everyone were Buddhas, then there would be no problems. Even if you're homeless, if you're a Buddha, it doesn't matter. So let's wish that for all sentient beings, those we can see, such as the homeless people, the people who are down and out here, as well as all the ones we can't see in other realms, those who are in destitute states and those who seem to be well off, let's wish that they can all achieve the lasting happiness of Buddhahood. And in order to bring them to Buddhahood, we have to be able to meditate. But in order to meditate, we have to have the proper view. And to develop the proper view, we have to study. We have to engage in listening and contemplating and meditating. And so think to yourself that for this reason, we are going to be teaching and listening to the Dharma today. And the Dharma that we are discussing is the way of the Bodhisattva by the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. And of the 10 chapters, we are discussing the 9th chapter. The 9th chapter begins with a discussion of the benefits of transcendent prajna. That means that basically everything that comes before it in the way of the Bodhisattva, all of the other transcendences are all for the purposes of developing prajna. And that if we meditate on prajna, we will be able to free ourselves and all other sentient beings from suffering. And so this is why we meditate on prajna. This is the benefit of meditating on prajna. And then we had the discussion of the 2 truths. And I just want to review that a little bit because it's something that's As I said last night, it's not rocket science, but it's kind of contrary to the way we normally think of things. So you have to think about it a little bit. You have to understand. We have two truths. We have the relative and the ultimate. The relative truth means all of the appearances of samsara and nirvana that appear to us or any other being because of interdependent causes and conditions. When we see them, we think that they are real, but they are not real the way we think about them. They are not true. They aren't lasting, enduring. They aren't solid. There's nothing really there. It's like a house of cards, or it's like a movie on Netflix, as we talked about last night. Nothing really there. That's the relative truth. But when you analyze the relative truth and you really look at it carefully, both logically or through the prajna of meditation, you see that things do not exist as they appear. Since things do not exist as things, I will give generously. You realize, as it says in the prayer, aspiration of my chair, we think that things are real, solid, and we cling to them. So you realize that actually what we think of as a thing, what we think of as being some object, does not exist the way we think about it. You can't say it exists. You can't say it doesn't exist. There's an appearance. That appearance is not true the way we think it is. It is not real. But it still occurs. So it's not nothing. It's not something. It's not nothing. You can't say it's both something and nothing, because that's just a logical impossibility. You can't be they're exclusive of each other, right? You can't say it's neither, because there's no alternative. Either you're existent or non-existent, and there's no third alternative, right? So it's none of these four extremes. There's nothing that can be found when you look at things, or when you engage in meditation and you examine things. You can't see anything. This is the ultimate nature of all phenomena. When the Buddhas look at the ultimate nature of the phenomena, they can't see anything. They never have seen anything. They do not see anything now. They never will see anything. This nature of all phenomena, even though on the surface there's a constant flux of interdependence, the actual nature never changes. There's never anything new, there's never anything real that occurs. All of a sudden something real occurs in emptiness. It's not like that. So there's this nature of emptiness where you can't identify anything. There's nothing. There's not really anything there. This is the ultimate nature. Even when you're looking at the ultimate truth, you can't see ultimate truth. There's ultimately no ultimate truth either, because there's no true or false for the Buddhas. There are appearances, and then there's the nature of appearances. But even those appearances are different. There's no true or false. And so when we talk about the relative and the ultimate truth, we're talking about it purely in conventional linguistic terms. We've got to have some word to call ultimate truth so we know we can talk about it. But actually, when you're really seeing it, there's no ultimate truth. There's no relative truth. But to talk about it, we use the words ultimate truth. So the ultimate truth is the way things really are. And in that sense, it's true, or we can use the word true. The relative truth is not true. It's fictitious. It's false. It's fake news. But it's consistent. And because it's consistent, and we all have, it appears in similar ways to all of us, we say that it is relative truth. So in terms of relative truth, it is, we have the, what do we say? In terms of the relative truth, there is the consistent appearance that they follow karmic cause and effect, and it's shared perceptions of all. That's what I was saying. I lost my train of thought for a moment. It's the kind of the shared perceptions of all sentient beings. So there are things that are true in relative truth, and there are things that are false in relative truth. The classic example is like if you have something true in relative truth, this napkin. This napkin is true in relative truth. You say it's really there in relative terms. But you would say that a rabbit horn is not true in relative truth, because no one has ever seen a rabbit with a horn. If you've seen something that looks like a rabbit with a horn, it's not a rabbit, it is a fabulous jackalope. That's right. It's not a rabbit, it's a fabulous jackalope. It's an entirely different sort of creature. And you seem to only find them in gift shops in Colorado. Or at least that's the only place I've seen them. right? So rabbits don't have horns. And so a rabbit horn does not exist in relative truth. Ultimately, the hornless rabbits and horned rabbits are essentially the same in all being illusions and that appear due to the delusion of our mind. So the ultimate and the relative, and worldly people see the relative truth, right? You see the relative truth. And then you start practicing Buddhism, start practicing yoga. And when you get to the level of actually seeing emptiness, then you're like really a yogi, right? You're actually seeing it. You're like a real yogi. But along the way, there are different stages. And so we say that for the type of relative truth, there's the worldly relative truth, and there's the yogic relative truth. For example, I didn't explain this so clearly last night, but to give an example of it, first of all, you have like the regular worldly people who think that everything is true as it appears. And then you have someone who studies the foundation vehicle of Buddhism, like someone who studies Theravada Buddhism. And they realize that everything they learn, they study, and they realize that everything is made up of aggregates, that what looks at us like a whole body is actually, they do the practice of foundation of mindfulness of body, and they realize that it's all just an aggregate that's put together. There's no real body. They see that the particles that make up the body are real, and they're impermanent, and they change from moment to moment. They see this. And so for them, that is a level of what they would call that ultimate truth. But in the middle way, we call that a level of the yogic relative. It's superior to the worldly way of thinking of things, right? Because they're having a more, a closer approximation in their mind of how things are than the worldly people. Instead of thinking that coarse phenomena are real, they realize that coarse phenomena are actually kind of like illusions, the same as we Madhyamaka people do. The appearance of your body is just an illusion produced by cause and effect. But the particles, they say, exist. And then to take that level a little bit step further, then the next level would be like people who study mind-only Buddhism. And this is especially common in the Chinese tradition. I mean, in the Tibetan tradition, it sounds like mind-only is almost like a straw man, someone who's not really, because mind-only Buddhism didn't get spread to Tibet, but it's very active in Chinese Buddhism, and it's actually a very, very subtle and wonderful philosophy. So in the mind-only school, they say, well, actually, you can't really establish that the particles that look outside, you can't establish that they exist independently of the mind. And therefore, everything is actually only mind. Everything is only an appearance of mind. But that mind, when you're sitting in meditation, and the confusion of the daily life subsides in meditation, you see that there is some sort of self-luminous, self-aware mind that truly exists, they say. So in this level, their position is, again, a little bit closer to the ultimate reality as we Madhyamaka, as we middle way people speak about it. But it's not quite there. So it's kind of another stage. So you've got the ordinary people, you've got the foundation vehicle view, you've got the mind-only school. And of course, there are going to be gradations within all of this as people get better and better understandings of each of their views, right? And then, you come to the middle way who say, well, actually, even the mind, if you look for the mind, if you say that there is a mind that is momentary, impermanent, arising in every moment, that's self-luminous and self-aware, you can't even really find that. You can't really identify anything that is that mind. So it's also emptiness. So everything is emptiness. And so that's the ultimate view. So thinking that is one thing, seeing it is a different matter. We have to train in order to be able to see it. But we've got these kind of different levels. They've got the Buddhist, the Buddhist, excuse me, we've got the non-Buddhist, the worldly people. We've got the foundation vehicle, the mind only. And then we also have like the middle way, these kind of four gross kind of levels. Then sometimes we distinguish, even within all of these, we distinguish different levels, but we won't get into that right now. But just through these different levels of that and of reality. So it's a question of how willing are you to accept the fact that everything we perceive is interdependent illusions that doesn't really have any true basis. It occurs through illusory causes and conditions and produces appearances that we then cling to. So how willing are you to accept that? And so this is the point where we've come to today, because this is actually a very difficult thing, because when someone holds up something, even something as flimsy as a napkin, right? This is not really, no one thinks of this as being like a really long-lasting thing, and yet we think that this is the same napkin that's been sitting on my table or that I've been picking up ever since, it was put there before the teaching, right? We think it's the same one, right? We think that it's real as long as it is until, someone tears it up. It's real, we think, right? So we have that feeling of this being this real napkin. So when you get into thinking about the middle way, the problem is that there is this real feeling like there has to be something. If there's just absolutely nothing, then how could we have any experience at all? I mean, if there is no basis for our experience, how can we have experience? There are causes and conditions coming together. Well, those causes and conditions, there has to be something true about them. Otherwise, how could we perceive everything? So this is the sorts of objections that people have, and that's the next portion of the text, dealing with these basic objections. And these basic objections come in, there are two different types. There are 6 objections to relative truth, and there are 6 objections to ultimate truth, or 2 objections to ultimate truth. So we're going to talk about the 6 objections to the relative truth first. And this is according to the commentary by Pao Tsulak Trengwa, who was a student of the 8th Karmapa Mikya Dorje, and wrote a long and wonderful commentary on the way of the Bodhisattva. That is the main one that we study in our Kagyu tradition. So these 6 objections to the relatives, it's not objecting to the relative, it's saying that the relative wouldn't work if there's just emptiness. There's a problem there, they're saying. The first is that it contradicts valid cognition, and I'll get into what we mean by valid cognition in a moment. There has to be something that you can know and that know. You know things, you see things, right? That it contradicts scriptures. Contradict scripture means that the Buddha said that there are things and they're impermanent, suffering, selfless, and empty. He said this. How can that be if they're all emptiness? The third one is that the Buddha taught that if you make an offering to the Buddha, that you get merit for that. But if there's no Buddha to offer to, how can you possibly get merit? You middle way people, you're so nihilistic. There's no way you can do anything meritorious because there's nothing to be meritorious towards, right? That's the third one. The fourth one is that if there's nothing real, beings could not be reborn. There'd be no way you could have rebirth, because there has to be something that goes from lifetime to lifetime. Like in the Theravada school, in the foundation vehicle school, it's the continuum of the 5 aggregates that continually keeps going from moment to moment and then takes rebirth. If there's no 5 aggregates, if they don't really exist, you couldn't have rebirth. And the fifth one is that killing would not be a misdeed. If you're not actually killing anyone, how could you be doing something wrong? If you're not actually stealing, if you're not actually engaging in sexual misconduct, then you might as well enjoy yourself. Do what you want. It's not going to have any karmic consequences because there's nothing real there, they say. And then the sixth one is that the Buddha would return to samsara. There's no difference between samsara and nirvana, and so you'd awaken to Buddhahood, and then that Buddhahood is illusory, and then samsara is illusory, so you end up back in samsara. So these are the 6 objections to the relative. So the first of these is that it contradicts valid cognition. As it says, it is consensus, not valid knowledge, that there is perception of form and such. Like the consensus of thee and clean is clean and so forth, it is false. So valid knowledge or valid cognition, this is at that time that Shantideva was teaching in the 7th century, and especially at a monastic university in India, like Nalanda, they had a lot of discussion about the topic called pramana in Sanskrit, or valid cognition validity. And what this teaches, it's basically saying epistemology. And to put it really, just to give a really simple explanation of it, when you see things perceptually, then you're seeing something that's really there. For example, you all are looking at the flowers on my table, but I have to lift them up. This is the Zoom. I have to do more activity to show things. You're looking at flowers that were on my table, and you see them, and you think they're real because I can see them. You see blue, and you know that you're seeing blue. Now, there are two levels here. There's the worldly level of looking at it, and you see that you're seeing flowers. And then right, these look like flowers, right? They are flowers, and everyone worldly is going to say that they're flowers. And we can see them. You know that they're there because you can see them. If you look at it on a slightly more deeper level, then there are all the particles that are, yellow and purple and green and so forth, that then are arranged in a shape that we can later give a name to a flower. But those particles are there and they're reflecting light back into our eyeballs so that we can see them, right? So that's more like the foundation vehicle, not exactly, but it's closer to the foundation vehicle view of how things are. So there are different levels of that. But in any case, you look and you see, and you're actually seeing something. You hear a sound, and there is actual sound that's coming into your ear that you're hearing. You smell a scent, and you know that it is someone who's wearing too much patchouli or whatever, or you know that it's sandalwood or whatever you're smelling, right? You feel something, or you taste something, and you know that it is that coffee from the Speckled Axe or wherever. Or you've got you're feeling something. You can feel your clothes on your body. You know that they're clothes because you could feel them, right? So this is like, things are there because you perceive them. Or you can know things because you can infer that they're there. When you see smoke, it's certain that there is fire somewhere nearby that produced that smoke. Maybe not right where the smoke is, but there had to have been a fire in order to produce that smoke. You know that. So this is what we call valid knowledge, knowing something by either seeing it or by really validly inferring it. So we see form. You see the form, you see the colors and the shapes that make up flowers or that make up robes or whatever. You see them. So when you say that there is perception of form and stuff, what we're talking about are seeing the particles of the different colors and the different shapes in particular. And we say, okay, and in the foundation school view, this is said that these are real because you can see them. So Shantideva's answer is said, this is through consensus. Everyone agrees. You see a certain sort of appearance, and then you have the consensus. We all agree that my robe is maroon. Some people would say red. Some people would say a different color, but we all have this consensus that it's like maroon, right? This is the color of the robe. That's consensus. And we think that we're seeing something real, that's also consensus. Actually, it's just an illusion that's produced, and it doesn't have to exist in order to appear to our minds. Just as, when you see a picture of the Dalai Lama on YouTube, you're not seeing the Dalai Lama, you're seeing an illusion of the Dalai Lama. You're not seeing the actual Dalai Lama. There's no real Dalai Lama in your TV set or your computer screen, but you can see him. And so this consensus is like, if this were not the case, then it would be that consensus that we're seeing, or since this is so, the consensus that you're seeing something red or seeing something blue is not true. It's not real. It's like the consensus that ordinary worldly people have when you see a beautiful person, an attractive person, and you say, what a gorgeous guy, what a gorgeous girl, what a gorgeous whatever. And you say, isn't that wonderful? You think that they're clean. They smell good. They've taken a shower. You think that this is a clean, good person, someone who you can get pleasure out of, right? But that is actually false, because if you look at that person, skin deep, it might look nice on the outside, but open it up, it's just filled, as we spoke about last year discussing the 8th chapter, inside there's all sorts of disgusting stuff. You pull the skin off it, it's not attractive at all. All sorts of fat and entrails and bones and blood and so forth. If you saw the person without their skin, you'd run away. So there's actually, the person, they're unclean, in that you give them something clean, they eat something clean, a nice piece of fruit, they eat something clean, and what does it come out as? Unclean. So it's just like another line of the way the Bodhisattva says, it's like a machine for making filth. So to say that that bodies are clean is actually not true. So so the yogis who meditate on the repulsiveness of the body have a deeper understanding. And if it were true that you could see color, then it would also be that you were seeing real color and so forth. Likewise, it would be true that the clean body you see would actually be clean, but it's not. Neither of those is true. So that's what this verse is saying. The next verse, it says, it contradicts scripture. So when we talk about the Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha taught that what do we say? The Buddha taught that there are things, particularly in the Theravada scripture. He taught that there is form, that there is feeling, there are conceptions, there are formations, there is consciousness. These exist, and they're momentary. They arise from cause and conditions, and they're momentary. So the Buddha taught that there are things. So the objection here is that the students from the foundation vehicle are saying, wait a minute, you're telling us that form and everything is illusion, but the Buddha said they're real. They're true. They ultimately exist, said the Buddha. So you can't be right because the Buddha said they exist. And so Shantideva's response is this, goes to this. In order to introduce the worldly, the Buddha taught that there are things. In fact, they are not momentary. So the objection is that the Buddha taught there are things, and the response is that the Buddha taught in kind of a graded fashion. If you teach everyone from the very beginning that everything is emptiness, then no one's going to listen to what you say because it's so different from our normal way of perceiving things. I mean, and you've probably had some experience of this in your Dharma centers. If you start talking about some really high view at the very beginning, people are going to be confused and not know what's going on. You have to start with something that people can understand. Likewise, when the Buddha taught the Dharma, he realized that his first disciples were not ready to understand emptiness. So all of the disciples in the beginning, Utpalivarna, Mahaprajapati, all of these other great arhats from the time of the Buddha, they weren't ready to understand emptiness. So he did not teach it to them. He taught it to other people who were, right? So in order to introduce the worldly, people who still cling to things as being real, he taught that there are things, and he said that they are momentary and that they arise and perish in every single moment. But there's nothing that's arising and perishing in every moment. In fact, they are not momentary. It means that the appearance of things arising and perishing in every moment is just an illusion. It's not really true. Then the response is that, well, this contradicts the relative truth. The relative truth couldn't work if you do this, because you have to have something that's appearing and making the relative. And Shantideva's response to that is, the yogic relative has no fault. Compared to worldly, it's seeing suchness, or else the worldly could refute their recognizing bodies as filth. So the yogic relative, so that is the understanding of like the foundation vehicle practitioners or the mind-only practitioners. There's no fault with that. It's relative. I mean, it's a yogic relative, but there's no problem with it because it is a step above. It can overcome the objections of the worldly people. So compared to the worldly, if you see things as being made up of momentary particles that come together because of causes and conditions, or that it's made up of moments of cognition that arise because of causes and conditions, that is already a big step up from the worldly way of clinging to things as being singular and enduring and solid and so forth. And so in that way, it's compared to the worldly, it's seeing suchness. But and if this were not the case, then when the Buddha taught that you practice the repulsiveness meditation and see the nature of all bodies as being filth, then if that were not the case, then the yogi's recognition of bodies as being filth could be refuted by worldly people, right? So that's the point here. Is that all clear? We're getting a little... All right, we're going on. We're going to move on, otherwise we don't have time. And the third objection is there's got to be something real, because the Buddha talked about karmic cause and effect, and in particular, he talked about merit. So if you do something good, then you get merit from it, and that is good karma, right? And that ripens in the future, as the Buddha taught. In particular, if you make an offering to the Buddha, then you are then that's a very meritorious act, and act, it's a very meritorious act, and you are going to reap the benefits of that in your future lives. This is what the Buddha taught, right? So Shantideva says to this, the merit from illusory victors is like that from existent ones. So the foundation vehicle says, okay, you've got a real Buddha, you've got a real person making offerings, and you're making a real offering. The thing that you're giving is real, the flowers or whatever you're giving is real, and the action is real. And when you've done that action, then you get real merit from you. What is it called? Anyways, it's a substance that you get according to the foundation vehicle. It's there. There really is something substantial that you get that's that merit. Chumisa, I would say. We call it in Tibetan. What is this? The substance that never goes to waste or that cannot decay. It's just there until it ripens. So the Madhyamaka response to that is, well, you have a real Buddha, and you're making a real offering, and you're getting real merit, and we have an illusory Buddha. We have an illusory person making illusory offerings. The thing that you're giving is illusory. The action is illusory, and the merit that comes from it is illusory, but it all still works in exactly the same way. It doesn't matter whether it's real or not for the cause and effect to work. The cause and effect still happens whether you consider it to be real or not. There doesn't have to be actually some sort of real particles or real substances in order for causes to produce results. When you look at a seed, you can dissect that seed into tinier, tinier parts until you can't find anything, especially if you're going down to the quantum level, but it'll still grow a tomato plant or whatever sort of plant, whatever sort of seed it is, right? So it's the same. It doesn't have to be real to produce results. So the Buddha does not have to be real in order for us to gain results of acting. Even if it's illusory, we can still gain the results of performing virtuous actions. Well, if everyone's illusory, then how can you be reborn? Because you have to have, your action, your karmic action has some sort of a substance that then propels you into your next rebirth. It affects your mind. You have real cravings. You have real consciousness. You have real everything. And that propels you to take your next birth in a real body. Otherwise, if it's all an illusion, how can it possibly work? And the answer is exactly the same. So the objection is, if beings are illusory after they die, how are they born? So the response to this is, illusions will arise as long as the conditions are assembled. Does merely lasting a long time mean sentient beings truly exist? So an illusion is also created out of causes and conditions. Now, they aren't real causes and conditions, but they're causes and conditions that we see, the appearances. You have the appearance of a person, such as yourself, the appearance of your mind, the appearance of your body. And because of causes and conditions, that goes through this life. And then it comes to the end of this lifetime, you pass away. And then because of the habits, the illusions, the causes and conditions haven't stopped yet. I mean, the body has passed away. That particular set of causes and conditions is pretty much done. Actually, even the body is going to go off and turn into ashes or compost or whatever it's going to turn into, whatever happens to your corpse. But your mind also still has the illusory craving and illusory mental factors and so forth to propel you into taking your next birth. It doesn't matter that that's illusory. The causes and conditions still work, even though they are illusory. And this will continue as long as the conditions are assembled, as long as you have craving. So if you want to overcome craving, you have to overcome craving. It doesn't matter if that craving is illusory or real. You have to develop the prajna that realizes the true nature to truly overcome it. Now, the objection here is, but if the body and the person is like an illusion, then it's kind of like, a person lasts for a fairly long time, like from the moment of birth up until death. That's like, somewhere between, probably somewhere between a few minutes and 100 years or 120 years, right? For many of us, especially if we survive childhood, it's, 40, 50, 70, 80, 90 years, however long it is. That's a fair amount of time. You have an illusion and it only lasts for a short period of time. So it's different. Those illusions, like if you have an illusionist who's creating the illusion of a being, then it doesn't work. It's a short period of time. So it's not the same, they say. to put this in a more contemporary example, a contemporary analogy, if you have a short movie, and then here the problem is I don't watch enough movies to remember any characters. I only watch movies on airplanes, maybe one per long flight. So I don't really have any basis except if you have your 1 hour Netflix show, are there such things? And they have a character named George who only lasts for an hour. Is that okay? Can I say that? The Netflix show, it only lasts an hour. Then it's the same, you know, like George is only there when the Netflix show is going on. When that stops, he's gone, right? But you're still there. You've been going on for for all this time. And the answer to this is that does merely lasting a long time mean sentient beings truly exist? Because some illusions go on for a very long time. Some Netflix shows go on for season after season after season. Does that make all the characters in, what is it, Succession more real? They've been going on for 6 seasons. Was it, Friends went on for what, 20 years or something? Are those characters more real just because they're longer? It doesn't work that way. It's not the length of time. It's really the nature of what it's like at that moment. So whether your life is short, whether your life is long, it's just a bunch of causes and conditions coming together, producing the illusion of this life, and the duration of the life is kind of secondary. In fact, it doesn't really matter because, you say that you've lived for, 55 years, let's say, or almost 55 years. You've lived for almost 55 years, but it doesn't make a whole lot of difference because everything up until this moment is already gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Everything that's going to happen in the future doesn't exist anymore. It has not yet come into being, therefore doesn't exist. So it's all the same in just being one instant. Really, I mean, there's no, duration of life is just a total mirage. You say I've been around for, I'm nearly 55 years old, and what happened to those first 54 years and 10 months and however many days it's been since I was born? They're gone. They're not there. So there's just the illusion of right now, really. Okay, so let's move on before I digress too far. Otherwise, we'll never finish. Killing would not be a misdeed. Killing illusory beings and such are not misdeeds, they have no mind, but merit and misdeeds arise with those who have illusory minds. So the objection is, as I said when I was giving the basic thing, if you kill something, the Buddha said that this is a misdeed, it's wrong, it's bad karma. You kill someone and it will ripen as suffering, either in this lifetime or in a future lifetime. This is the nature of karma. There has to be a real, if you're not actually killing a person, what good is it? I mean, because if you have a misdeed, I mean, if you have a real person, then you can kill them. But if you have like a character on Succession, what is his name? Logan something? I only read about these in too many online things. There's Logan who dies. The writers have killed Logan off. But who have they killed? They haven't killed anyone. They're not getting anything wrong, right? There's no misdeed for that, right? But it's different if you were to go out and assassinate your least favorite political leader. Then that would be a real misdeed, right? So what's the difference? You have to have something real if a killing is going to be a misdeed. And the response is that killing illusory beings and such are not misdeeds, they have no mind. So the image of Logan in Succession on the screen has no mind. There's nothing there to see. Or perhaps actually a better example is if you're in a first-person shooter where you're going around killing everyone all the time in the first-person shooter video game, right? You kill someone in a video game, they blow up, and then someone else comes and you blow them up. There's no misdeed to that. There may be habituation to killing. It may make you feel like more comfortable pulling a trigger, something like that. But it is not actually killing. There's no being killed, so it's not actually killing. Because the illusion that you're seeing on your computer screen has no mind. I mean, I think we're all most of us here are beyond the video age, sort of video game sort of age. But, if you play video games, then you're not actually killing because that being has no mind. But if you have an illusion that also has an illusion of a mind, that is a sentient being. For example, your least favorite political leader is an illusion, but they have an illusory mind. So when you assassinate your least favorite political leader, then you're killing a being with an illusory mind. And because of that, They experience suffering that's illusory, but they don't realize it's illusory. So there is a misdeed there. That's the difference. So the illusions don't have minds. The characters in the video games do not have minds. But quote unquote real illusory people, the people who we kind of see in relative life, in relative terms, do have illusory minds. And so for that reason, killing them is a misdeed. And then the same goes for all of the other misdeeds of stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and so forth. Since spells and such don't have that power, illusory minds do not arise. Produced by various conditions, illusions are various as well. So what people say is, well, wait a minute, how is it the illusory sentient being can have a mind? I mean, illusions don't have minds. So why can't you create if the sentient being is illusory and the illusion is illusory, they're the same. The mind is illusory, so they're the same. But the point is that the sentient being does have a mind because of the causes and conditions, but the illusion doesn't. The bad guy in the video game that you shoot up does not have a mind, and the reason they don't have a mind is because they don't have the conditions that would produce mind. So everything comes from its own sort of conditions, and if you don't have a condition that's going to produce sentience, that's going to produce consciousness, then there's no mind. So something can be produced by a computer all you want, and whether it be a character in a video game, or whether it be even like some sort of large learning AI model, some chat GPT or whatever, that some people are afraid are going to be sentience. If there is no cause of sentience, then there's not going to be sentience, even if it looks like it's sentient on the outside. In other words, these can mimic sentience all we want. They can even fool us into thinking that they are sentient, but unless they have the cause of sentience, which is a previous moment of consciousness, unless they have consciousness already, you have to have some sort of moment of consciousness to produce the next one. If you look at your own mind, consciousness comes out of the previous moment, and the consciousness then leads to the next moment. So you have to have sentience to begin with. But if we go on for too long on this topic, we will be not getting into the rest of this. I've spoken about it in previous years, and we can discuss it later if you have questions, but I'm not going to belabor it too much right now. So the point is, as Shantideva says, nowhere is there a single condition that's capable of everything. So the old ancient Indian illusionists could have all the things that they need to produce the illusion of a person or a horse or an elephant. They could take their sticks and rocks and whatever and do whatever mantra and then create an illusion of a person or an elephant. But because they don't have the condition that makes conscious, they can't make it. And there's no single condition that produces everything. Everything comes out of different conditions. So you have to have the right sort of condition to produce the various things. As it says in the ancient text, this is not a modern thing. If you look at the colors in a peacock tail, there are just an infinite number of different hues in a peacock feather, right? We don't see peacock feathers too often in Maine. Have you all seen peacock feathers? You've seen? No. Well, they're really beautiful. There are a lot of different colors, and like every single fiber that comes off, I don't know every little bit of it has a hair that comes off of the feather has a different color, and they're like iridescent hues of blues and greens and a little bit of yellow and black. And one of the hairs might change colors over the course, and each of these different hues has a different cause. It comes out of something else. There's just you've got thousands, tens of thousands of filaments coming off of the feather, all of many different colors. And each of the different colors on each of the different on each of the hairs on the feather has a different cause. So it's like thousands upon thousands of causes just for the peacock feather. Well, then you go then to the actual peacock. Then there's even more causes, because you've got the cock, the comb, the iridescent neck, and all this is like just incredible number of causes and conditions, and they all have different causes. Similarly, for our consciousness, it has many different causes and conditions that come forward and make it. And same with our bodies. I mean, you can look at it. I mean, you've got a hairy arm like mine. There's what do we say? There's each of my hairs. I mean, there are not as many causes as there are in a peacock feather because they're shorter. That's the only reason why. But, the arm has many different causes and conditions. The mind has different causes and conditions. You can't find any single cause that produces everything. It's all a mass of interdependent conditions. This is the Buddhist teaching of interdependence. Things arise because of each other. When we talk about interdependence, there are two types of interdependence. The first is the interdependent arising, where everything arises because of various different causes and conditions. You have a single main condition, but you have many different, you have a single main cause, but you have many different conditions that contribute to it. So everything, that's the first type. And then the second type of interdependence is the interdependence of kind of naming things in relation to each other, like long in relation to short, big in relation to small, beautiful in relation to ugly, all of these sort of things. So there are different ways that things operate independently. But in either case, there are just a whole number of different dependent causes and conditions that come together to make up the appearances that we see in our daily life. And the last of these relative, the last of the objections to the relative is that the Buddha would return to samsara. Is that, okay, you say relatively, the appearance of relative truth is, the appearance is relative truth, but the nature is the ultimate truth. So everyone's actually already, I mean, every sentient being already has that ultimate truth as their nature, right? So why are Buddhas, how can Buddhists be freed from samsara? If beings still cycle relatively, though ultimately they're nirvana, then even Buddhas would transmigrate. Why bother with the way of Bodhi? So what this is saying is that sentient beings still travel, go from birth to birth and experience all the suffering of samsara, but their nature is ultimately emptiness. It's all exactly the same as a Buddha. There's no difference in nature between a Buddha and a sentient being. But sentient beings keep wandering in samsara. So Buddhas, they awaken to enlightenment, but they still have the same appearances and the same nature, don't they? So why don't they continue to transmigrate or wander through samsara? So if that's the case, then why bother trying to achieve Buddhahood with the way of Bodhi, or the path to enlightenment? And so the answer here is that unless the continuum of conditions is severed, illusions will not cease. We sentient beings ordinary beings have illusions of the relative truth. In other words, the perceptions that we have, the appearances that we have are actually illusory, and we don't see them as being illusory. We experience these illusions, and they will continue as long as the causes and conditions. As I was just saying, there are all sorts of causes and conditions that come together to produce us. As long as the main causes are not severed, unless that continuum of the causes and conditions is severed, then the illusions are going to keep happening. And in particular, for us sentient beings, the cause that prevents us is either craving or ignorance. As long as we have craving and ignorance, then we're still going to cycle in samsara. But once you break through those causes, once you cut through your craving entirely, once you cut through your ignorance entirely, then the illusions will no longer arise, even relatively, when the conditions have been severed. And so when the Buddha has achieved total enlightenment, then they've completely cut through all of their ignorance and even the most subtle imprints of ignorance in their being. And so there's no basis for any illusion to arise anymore. And so the illusions of relative truth completely cease for a Buddha. This is not to say that a Buddha is seeing nothingness. I'm not saying that. But the illusions of the relative world cease for the Buddha because they've severed the conditions. And so it's like with anything. When you turn off a light, like you have a light switch that turns on the light. We have the light switches turn on the light here. All of the causes and conditions are present for light to come out of the lights, except for one. The light switch has not been switched so that there's no contact between the the wires that bring the electricity to the light, right? So no light is showing because the light switch is not switched. So that's that one condition. All the other conditions for light are present. The power is not out, right? We're in Maine. The power is more stable somewhat, right? The power, so there's power. There are lights. There's fixtures. The one thing that's missing is the switch is not on. So if you turn off the switch of ignorance, then you're going to stop that sort of light of relative phenomena, right? It's the same way. You've got to stop that one cause. You don't have to stop all the causes. The light is still there. The wires are still there, but there's no light. You just turn it off, turn the switch off, and then the light goes off, right? It's the same. So those are the objections to the relative. So next we will talk about the two objections to the ultimate. We might only talk about one of these this morning because it's getting to be a lot of material. I don't want to overwhelm you too much. On the other hand, we have to try to cover the whole chapter in 2 weekends. So we have to go through a little bit, but we'll do a little bit. We'll go through a little bit, probably the first of these. So we have two objections to the ultimate. So these prior ones are objections to the relative. They're talking about karmic cause and effect wouldn't work. There'd be no merit. You couldn't kill, or there wouldn't be any killing. There wouldn't be any merit. Appearances, you wouldn't see things. That's objections to the relative truth. Here we're talking about objections to the ultimate truth, basically saying if there is no basis, then you wouldn't be able to see illusions, you wouldn't be able to experience anything. So this is talking about the relative, the ultimate truth, because if the ultimate truth is empty, there'd just be no basis for anything. So it's divided into two parts, and these are illusions would not exist even relatively, and there would be no basis for experience. Excuse me for one moment. Now, the other difference, and I think other commentaries probably explain it more along this line. This is the way, according to Pao Zhuocheng's outline for it. Other commentaries talk about the section that we just went through as the objections from realists, that is, from the Foundation Vehicle School. And they talk about this passage that we're getting to as the objections from the mind-only school, which is actually a different way of looking at the same thing. So what we just talked about were primarily objections to the relative truth, and the person who was making the objections would have been someone from the Foundation School, or straw man in this case. Next, we're coming to the objections from the mind-only school that are saying, if your ultimate truth doesn't work, because if you don't have that, there's nothing real in ultimate truth, then there can't be any relative truth. Within the mind-only school, there are actually two different schools, and these two schools are called the True Image School, sometimes also translated as the True Aspectarian, which is a real mouthful of a word. And then there's the False Image School, or also called the False Aspectarian. Now, I will explain the meaning of these as we come to them in the text. I don't want to overwhelm you all at once, but it's actually not as hard as it sounds. When you don't know the terms, just not knowing the words makes it far more difficult to begin with, right? So you've got to kind of learn what they're saying and what they mean. And then when you understand that, okay, there is some meaning to that. So don't worry about the new terms. But basically, the mind-only school has two parts, the true image and the false image. So first, we have the objections from the true image school. And actually, this first objection is one that comes from any mind-only school, really. If confused mind does not exist, what is it that observes illusions? But if for you the illusion itself does not exist, then what's observed? So the mind-only school here, their point is that when you look at the external appearances, you can't find them anywhere. They can't exist anywhere independent of mind. Excuse me. The external images can't have any true existence of their own, but they do appear to mind. We do experience them. We know that there is mind, but we cannot prove that there actually are any external things. You can't prove that they exist, but we can prove that mind exists because we experience it. So there's this mind. And that mind may be confused, but it has to be real. If you didn't have a confused mind, how could you perceive the illusions? In other words, how could the appearances of the relative occur if there is no one who's perceiving the appearances, right? If you have an appearance can only be an appearance if someone's perceiving it, right? If you're looking and seeing, so if there's something that is being seen, there has to be someone who actually sees. So there has to be a mind that sees, otherwise there wouldn't be all these various different perceptions. Now, the things that you perceive, they don't exist. The external things, we're fine to say that they're empty, they don't exist. That's great, but there has to be that mind. This is their point. So if confused mind does not exist, what is it that observes illusions? In particular, you have to have the eighth consciousness has to truly exist. Then Shantideva's response is, well, but if for you the illusion itself does not exist, then what's observed? So you have this, okay, let's say you actually have this mind, and it sees an illusion. So you see an illusion of flowers, right? You've got the illusion of flowers on either live or over Zoom, right? You're seeing flowers. So you have a mind that has to, if they're, so just as a moment ago, we said, if there's something being perceived, there has to be someone perceiving it. Well, if there are no flowers perceived, is there any mind perceiving the flowers? There's not. So if what you're seeing is just an illusion and isn't really there, then what's perceiving it can't be any more than illusion as just being there. So what is observed? If the illusion itself does not exist, then what's observed? If you have a real mind, it has to see something. What is it seeing? This is the big question, right? So if the mind is seeing illusion, then what is what is the mind actually seeing? So here's where we come to the particular point about the true image school. And it's these next two lines. In suchness, there is something else. That image is the mind itself. So there is an image that appears in your mind, right? This is actually very similar to many schools of contemporary psychology, neuroscience, and so forth, and philosophy. It's what we would call these days a representational theory of consciousness, where you have like, when you see something, there is a cognitive image of that thing that appears in your mind. So many neuroscientists would say that there is the sensor input that comes in, it kind of tickles a few things in your brain and produces an image of that external thing somehow in the visual cortex. In the mind-only school, the idea is that you've got this cognitive image. There is an image that occurs because of causes and conditions, primarily related to your eighth consciousness. So eighth consciousness or ground consciousness, since we're not talking about mind only here, I'm not going to go into detail on it. It means your subconscious, essentially. In contemporary terms, we'd say your subconscious. It's kind of a momentary sort of underlying field of consciousness that kind of burbles along, and then it spits up all these images that we see, and then they subside back into the subconscious. So things come from the subconscious, they poke up into our consciousness, and then they go back down. And when something pops up into our consciousness so that we see them, you have your image in the consciousness of something, then that's an image of that is like a part of mind that you're seeing. That image is the mind itself. Now, the difference between, one major difference between, well, there are many major differences. I mean, the first is that this is actually considered to be mind, not brain. So many neuroscientists talk about this all as being like an epiphenomenon of brain. In the mind only, it's not. The brain itself is also illusory. It's also an external physical thing. It cannot exist independently of mind. But the mind is there. So it's an entirely cognitive process. That's the first difference. The second difference is that there are actually two images that happen every moment in the mind. You have one image is of the thing that you're seeing. And then you have the second image is of the person, of like the seer. What's perceiving that? Now, they're both part of mind, right? And then you've got the objective image. So you have the objective image, you have the image of flowers, right? So I'll hold the flowers in front so that people see them instead of my face on Zoom. Maybe that's not so good. You have the flowers, you have the image of flowers in your mind. At the same time, there's also a subjective, that's the objective image. Then there's also the subjective image, the idea, the feeling that there is someone or something, there is a seer who is seeing that image of the flowers. These are both in your mind. So you've got two images. That subjective image thinks it's seeing an external thing, but it's actually only seeing the objective image. And in this way, it is said to be self-aware. Mind is actually knowing itself. Because the subjective image and the objective image are both parts of the same cognition. They're parts of the same thing, and they're sort of, one is seeing the other, but it's actually the same thing, seeing itself. So it's said to be self-aware. This is what is meant by self-aware in the mind only, at least as explained by Dharmakirti and Dignaga. So you've got these two images, the subjective image and the objective image. So one is kind of like thinking it sees the other. In the true image school, it says that these images are real. That's why it's called the true image. They're part of mind itself. They actually really exist. The images, what is perceived, what is appearing in them is an illusion, but the image itself is really there, cognitively. It's not like there's some substance, it's a cognitive thing, but it's really there. You've got the subjective image and the objective image are really there. That's why it's called the true image. So here, Shantideva does not mention the subjective image, but later for understanding self-awareness, which comes up, you have to know a little bit. So I've just added that. Basically, we're talking about the objective image right now. You've got the image of the flowers in your mind, right? That image is not the flowers. It's an illusion of flowers. You can even close your eyes and imagine flowers, and you can, well, depending upon your different capacities, you can sort of visualize flowers. Some people can't. It doesn't matter if you can or not, but you can have this image of flowers even without actually looking at flowers. That image is there. So it's the same, whether or not there are flowers there to see or not, there is the image in the mind, and that is the mind itself. So Shantideva's response is, if mind itself is illusory, at that time, what is seen by what? And the protector of the world, that is the Buddha, has said mind is not seen by mind. So if the mind is an illusion, then what is it? If what you're seeing, that image is of flowers, it's an illusion of flowers. It's not really flowers, it's an illusion of flowers. If that's illusion, then the mind's illusion. So what is seeing what? Because if the illusion is illusion, then the whole, and it's part of mind, then the mind is illusion. That's his first objection. And his second objection is the idea of self-awareness. You have the subjective image that's seeing the objective image, that's self-aware. It's knowing itself. But the Buddha said the mind is not seen by mind. You cannot see, the Buddha said in sutras, and the analogy is given, a sword blade cannot cut itself, and it is just the same with mind. So in the Sutra of the Travels to Lanka, it says, you know, a sword cannot cut a sword. You've got a knife. No matter how sharp a knife is, it can cut something else, but it cannot cut itself. If you have your fingertip, you can touch all sorts of things with your fingertip. You can touch the tips of other fingers, right? You can touch the tips of fingers, but my right index finger cannot touch the tip of my own right index finger. You can be really strong. No matter how strong, you can be so strong that you could lift, you know, a huge person and carry them on your shoulders. But no matter how strong you are, you cannot carry yourself on your shoulders, right? So if something is acting, it acts on something else. So when mind knows something, it has to know something else. Mind doesn't know mind. There can't be. So to say that it's self-aware, how can you say that? Because it doesn't work. Now, this is talking about self-aware as being a real mind seeing its real self. It's not talking about the illusory aspect of, if you agree that it's all illusion, there's an illusion of self-awareness, fine, excellent. It's actually very good. But if you say that there's some real mind that knows itself, that's a problem. So the sword blade cannot cut itself, and it is the same with the mind. If mind is going to know something, the object of the action has to be different than the agent of the action. They have to be separate. That's kind of, this is, in part, this is related to, comes out of Sanskrit grammar. This is a very common sort of line of reasoning that comes up in the Sanskrit philosophy, that you have to have the agent of the action and the recipient, or the object of the action, must be separate. You can't do something to itself. The subject and object of a sentence have to be different if you're performing an action. There has to be some sort of difference if there is a real action. So I don't know how this is. I haven't studied enough Western philosophy to understand this. It might be interesting to compare it. But this is the point from the ancient Sanskrit philosophy, is if you're going to perform an action, you perform an action on something else. When you cut down a tree, the axe or the chainsaw is different than the tree, right? The chainsaw cannot cut itself. It can cut the person holding it, but it can't cut the chainsaw. All right. If we're in Maine, we have to talk about chainsaws, don't we? Get out your Husqvarna. Okay. So the next line is saying, refuting that mind is self-illuminating. So the mind-only school says two things. They say that mind ultimately exists, and it is by nature it is self-illuminating and self-aware. So we just spoke about self-aware, right? Basically, it's like the subjective aspect is knowing the objective aspect. It knows itself. You think you're seeing something outside, but if you realize it, the true nature, you're actually seeing the mind as being aware of itself. The other point is that it is self-illuminating. And in order to make this understandable, we also have to go back a little bit and think about how words are used in Sanskrit. Sorry, you're getting a class from a translator. Because otherwise, sometimes illuminating, and when we talk about luminous mind, we use these words all the time in Mahamudra teachings, right? Luminous, self-aware, clear, all sorts of words. And it's like, well, what do we mean by luminous? What do we mean by illuminating? Well, illuminating, the way the word prabhasa, which means one of the words that means illuminating in Sanskrit, the way it is used in Sanskrit is sometimes it's like you have a light that illuminates something, that sheds light so that makes something seen. But it's also is like something that makes something else known. The light illuminates. So just as you turn on the lights and then you can see everything in the room, you turn on the lamp, or you know, in the ancient traditions, you light the lamp and the lamp lights the room. Well, the mind doesn't need something else to light it. Mind is, you don't need anything to make the mind know itself, because the mind knows itself. That's its nature. It's self-aware. So it's self-aware, self-illuminating. So illuminating is like, here we're talking about something that can make it so you can know something, right? So self-illuminating. You don't need anything else to know the mind. It's luminous. Its nature is self-luminous. If you say it is like a lamp illuminating its own nature, so you have a lamp, you light your lamp, the lamp will, you go into your dark room and you have the lamp will help you see everything there. Or maybe we should say these days, when you have the rare power outage in Maine and you get your flashlight, sorry, I've got to use American idioms here, you get your flashlight and you go into the root cellar to look for something, or down into the basement, you can see everything in the basement because you have the flashlight. You can fumble away to your way to the furnace to make sure that everything is all right, because you've got the flashlight so you can see, right? The flashlight allows you to see everything. But the flashlight itself doesn't need anything to light it, because it's naturally light. You look at the light from the flashlight. And here, when you're specifying the flashlight, I'm not a flashlight or the lamp. When I'm talking about a flashlight, I don't mean the battery pack behind and the handle. I mean the actual light part in the front. When you're talking about a lamp in the traditionally, they're talking about the lit lamp, the flame on the candle lamp, the flame of the candle, the flame of the lamp. That's what we're talking about. The flame of the candle or the flame of a lamp does not need anything to light it, because its nature is light. It illuminates itself, they say. Shantideva's retort is, a lamp is not illuminated, for it is not obscured by darkness. Because if you want to illuminate something, it has to be dark, right? If you go into your basement and the lights are already on, then the flashlight's not illuminating everything, because you can already see it. If you're looking at the flashlight, if you're looking at the candle flame, it's already light. There's nothing dark there for it to illuminate. If something is, the function of illumination is to remove darkness. Now, this is, of course, again, kind of, what do we say, a pre-modern way of conceptualizing it, right? Because these days we'd say that darkness is just the absence of light. And therefore, there's no darkness to be dispelled. As long as there's light, then there's, then there is no darkness. So it's a little bit different than our modern way of thinking about it. If you think of darkness as being some sort of a thing that is driven away by light, which is the way it was understood in the middle of the first millennium in India, then you light the light, it drives away the darkness so that you can see, right? Otherwise, if there's nothing that drives away the darkness, then you won't be able to see. The lamp itself, the moments it lit, there's no way for there to be any darkness there. So it's not illuminating itself because it's not removing darkness from itself. There never was any darkness there. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys, I'm not looking enough on the screen to see how you guys on the Zoom are doing, but let's see we're 20 minutes past 11. What's the next one? I think I'm going to stop there for now. That'll be enough for today. And let's see, we're going to do the closing prayers now. But before we do the closing prayers, let's see. I have to get things ready. So Khenpo David Rinpoche has taken a bit ill. It's I don't know exactly what it is. It's apparently an illness that's not so dangerous for someone who's young and hale and hearty, but when you're 90, it's a different matter. So this morning, I received a new long life prayer for Trungpa Rinpoche, written by the Gyalwa Karmapa. And so I didn't prepare as much today as I would have liked, but we have this prayer. And I thought that what we would do is we should go through and recite this prayer like it's brand new. It's like, what is it? 8 hours. His Holiness wrote it 8 hours ago. And so we'll recite it. So I will share this with you now. And the first thing I'd like to do is go through and let's talk about what it means first, because I think it'll mean more to you if you understand the meaning of the words. Because these long life prayers have a lot of images. And actually here we also have some copies. They are 3 pages each. So Ted will come up and distribute these. So it begins with the phrase Om Svasti. So this is kind of a, like, so be it, or may it be. This is a Sanskrit phrase here. And it begins by talking about the goddess Namgyalma in Tibetan, or Vijaya in Sanskrit. So it says, O peaceful Kaya with 3 faces and 8 arms, appearing from the empty nature of Dharmata, as a beautiful illusory goddess, O best of guides, please protect us. So Namgyalma, or Vijaya in Sanskrit, this is a picture of Vijaya. She has 3 faces. The center one is white, the right one is yellow, the left one is blue. She has 8 arms. She's really very beautiful. She is one of our 3 main long life goddesses, or long life deities. So there's Amitayus, white tar of the wish-fulfilling wheel, and Vijaya, these 3. So that first stanza, to go back to that, can I go back? So the peaceful Kaya with 3 faces and 8 arms, appearing from the empty nature of Dharmata. The Dharmata is the empty nature that we've just been talking about. As a beautiful illusory goddess, best of guides, please protect us. And then the next stanza is also fairly easy to understand. May the deities of deathless life. The deities of deathless life would be Namgyalma, or Vijaya, Amitayus, and White Tara, the wish-fulfilling wheel, who triumph over the Lord of death and dispel the obstacles of life, extend the glorious Guru's life. So when we're reciting this, we're asking the long life deities to please do whatever they can to help Rinpoche live longer. Through the always peaceful Dharmakaya, the constant flow of Sambhogakaya, and various emanated marvels, may the Guru's body firm and stable. So here, the Dharmakaya, we'll be speaking about the Dharmakaya hopefully this afternoon, if I don't get too hung up on the mind only. The Dharmakaya is like the full manifestation of the empty nature when you have full realization of it. The Dharmakaya, and then the constant flow of the Sambhogakaya. You have the Buddha. Only Buddhas can perceive the Dharmakaya, and as I will speak about this afternoon, for other beings to understand, they have to appear in different forms, which are this Sambhogakaya, which continually appears in the pure realms teaching Dharma, and the various emanated marvels, the various Nirmanakayas, may they appear. And then because of these three kayas of the Buddha, may the guru's body be firm and stable, so may be long living, with burgeoning life force, and may have a lot of vitality. And may he live long within the field of vision of us disciples, so that we would be able to see him as a glorious symbol of constancy. So like those constancies, so like the symbol of this is a hard one to translate into English. The actual thing is it's actually a swastika. Before the swastika was appropriated by the Nazis, it's an ancient symbol of constancy, long life, and so forth. So, like this symbol, this unbreakable symbol of constancy, may Rinpoche live long, and may he ripen the good fields of disciples with the rain. So it's like perform the activity, just like a rain cloud showers down rain. May he be able to shower down the rain of Dharma upon us, the disciples. We're like a field that can grow a crop of Buddhahood. And the rain is the rain of Dharma that matures the three families. Now, of course, I didn't have a chance to check with His Holiness what he meant about the three families here. So I'm not I don't feel like I can give a good could be the families of the Manjushri, Chenrezig, and Vajrapani. It could be three of there are other different presentations of families at any rate. And then the last few lines read, Gurus, three jewels, Yidam deities, and protectors of Vajra Dharma who have Samaya. Do not neglect this even a moment, fulfill our prayers. So please do your work. Help Rinpoche live long. We will begin by praying. And so this was written by the Karmapa Rinpoche Dorje. As he said, I wrote this so that Kyabje Trungpa Rinpoche may be cured of illness. And he wrote this as it came to mind without changing anything. He just wrote it down, didn't edit it, didn't change it. Well, he did make one little edit later. He corrected some spelling, but he just wrote it as it was. And so this is that. And so we translated it into English and Chinese. I didn't do the Chinese translation, but there is a Chinese translation for people to read as well. So when we recite the prayers, we're going to begin with this prayer that's showing on the screen now for the Karmapa. This is a prayer that's written by Bokar Rinpoche, the previous Bokar Rinpoche. The current Bokar Rinpoche is about 16 years old. The previous Bokar Rinpoche wrote this, and it is one that is often recited. Actually, often when His Holiness does events, this is the long life prayer that we recite. So that's one reason why I put it here. And then after that, we'll recite the prayer that the Karmapa just wrote. We'll recite it once in Tibetan and then twice in English, okay? So that we get both. But today we'll do the Karmapa's prayer just in English, okay? And then after that, we'll have the regular prayers for Amitabha and so forth. O Karmapa, embodiment of the compassion of all Buddhas. Karmapa, union of the activity of all Buddhas. Karmapa, empowered as regent of all Buddhas. Virgin total Chinne, may your life be long. Om Svasti Chuni Tompe Ngani Le Jutro Zeme Tsu Shaosum Chaje Shiwe Ku Namjen Tambe Jeso Chum Chida Dule Gyalche Jing Mitun Se Parche Sa Chime Tse Latso Gi Pauden Lame Kutse Sing Tato Shiva Chugi Ko Junmi Cheba Longe Zo Natso Trube Zo Ye dulce mi ramden be tse wang ramje lame ko wen pa ramden jing rikson min be cha yi dulce shing san min bra Lama Chosun Yedam Dorje Chosun Tamden So Yawa Keji Me Baru Mumbe Dundru Om Swasti, O peaceful Kaya with the three faces and 8 arms, appearing from the empty nature of Dharmata as a beautiful illusory goddess. O best of guides, please protect us. May the deities of deathless life, who triumph over the Lord of death and dispel the obstacles to life, extend the glorious Guru's life. Through the always peaceful Dharmakaya, the constant flow of Sambhogakaya, and various emanated marvels, may the Guru's body, firm and stable, with burgeoning life force, live long within the field of vision of us disciples as a glorious symbol of constancy, and ripen the good field of disciples with the rain of Dharma that matures the 3 families, Gurus, 3 jewels, Yidam deities, and protectors the Vajra Dharma who have Samaya. Do not neglect this, even a moment, fulfill our prayers. Om Swasti, O peaceful Kaya with 3 faces and 8 arms, appearing from the empty nature of Dharmata as a beautiful illusory goddess. O best of guides, please protect us. May the deities of deathless life, who triumph over the Lord of death and dispel the obstacles to life, extend the glorious Guru's life. Through the always peaceful Dharmakaya, the constant flow of Sambhogakaya, and various emanated marvels, may the Guru's body, firm and stable, with burgeoning life force, live long within the field of vision of us disciples as a glorious symbol of constancy, and ripen the good field of disciples with the rain of Dharma that matures the 3 families, Gurus, 3 jewels, Yidam deities, and protectors of the Vajra Dharma who have Samaya. Do not neglect this, even a moment, fulfill our prayers. I supplicate that the lamas be healthy. I supplicate that their lives be supremely long. I supplicate that their activities spread and flourish. Bless me to never be separate from the lamas. May the glorious Lama's lotus feet be firm. May happiness come to all throughout space. May I and all others gather the accumulations, purify obscurations, and swiftly be brought to Buddhahood. How wondrous is the Buddha, infinite light, with all great compassion on his right. Great power on his left, all in the midst of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas beyond number. As soon as I pass on, may I be born without another lifetime in between, in that pure land of happiness and wonder that is called Sukhavati, and see the Buddha's Amitabha's face. I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, bless me that my prayer may be fulfilled without impediment. Buddhism, Bodhisattvas of all times, and other Christians, please consider me. Rejoicing in the two accumulations, I offer all my merit to the jewels. Thus may the teachings of the Buddha thrive. I dedicate this virtue to all beings. May every sentient being reach Buddhahood. I gather all the virtues there may be in one, so they may ripen in my being. May I be cleansed of the two obscurations, and then perfect the two accumulations. May I live long, be healthy, and increase in both experience and realization. In this life, may I rise through the 10 levels. And when I pass away, may I at once be born in the pure Sukhavati. When I am born there, may the lotus open, may I reach that same body. Once I've achieved enlightenment, may I guide beings forever with my emanations. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, undoing and free all wanderers from the ocean of the existence, turned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Thank you all very much. So we will have our lunch break for those of us on the East Coast, your coffee break for everyone on the West Coast, and resume in what, a little under 2 hours. So thank you all very much. See you in a couple hours.
Thank you, Khenpo.